Hello everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Jeffrey McIntosh. I produce videos about Pu-erh tea, and I've been in the industry for a while, and I've been drinking this tea now for over a decade. So I always like to share my experiences, what I've learned, and hopefully it will benefit other people. And also I can learn from all of you as well and your experiences. So today I want to focus on ripe Pu-erh tea. What is good quality ripe Pu-erh? How can we tell the difference between bad and good ripe Pu-erh when there's so much out there in the market? So first, I think when we think about ripe Pu-erh, I won't go too much into history. There's a lot of really great articles online about the history of ripe Pu-erh and how it was invented and how it was created in the 1970s and how it came to be, etc. I want to kind of more focus on just quality, good and bad quality ripe Pu-erh. Now, before, back in the early days, distinguishing good and bad quality ripe Pu-erh was very easy. There was only good and bad ripe Pu-erh. There wasn't fake ripe Pu-erh, or clean ripe Pu-erh, or dirty ripe Pu-erh. It was just good and bad, and it was pretty simple. And the two ways you could tell was bad quality ripe Pu-erh would be, of course, very dark, very strong. You could brew it very, very many times. But the color was opaque or murky or cloudy. And the aroma was kind of funky, for lack of a better word. Just not very natural smelling. And then lastly, the taste was quite strange. So that was one type of ripe Pu-erh. And then there was good quality ripe Pu-erh, which was also very dark and strong and abundant. You could steep it a lot, very durable. But the color was very clear and translucent. So let's keep that in mind. It could be translucent, but very dark. So very much similar to like a really good quality red wine. And then the aroma was also strong, but it was more natural and pleasant. And then the taste profile was maybe round, abundant, creamy, and natural. So it was pretty easy to distinguish. Not so good quality ripe Pu-erh was kind of dirty and murky and muddy and had kind of funky aroma and taste profile. And then good quality was very translucent, had a lot of clarity. Natural aroma, pleasant. So let's talk about that natural aroma, or that funky aroma. So I don't know if any of you have walked into, this is a good analogy actually, walking into a forest after a rain or so, it's kind of wet, the forest floor, or maybe there's some trees and branches on the floor, and you might feel kind of a natural woody-like aroma. That's very natural and pleasant. And some ripe Pu-erhs do have a strong natural woodsy aroma. That's okay. But have you ever walked into maybe the woods and maybe there was a mildewy log or moldy log on the pathway and just kind of had this kind of funky, strange, right? One might say that that is not of a natural aroma. It's a little bit more off-putting. That applies to ripe Pu-erh, right? It should be natural and pleasant. It can be strong and maybe even unfamiliar to you, but it should be natural and pleasant. If it's kind of funky, off-putting, any kind of sharp sensation in the aroma, maybe a little mildewy, that would be undesirable. So that was pretty easy back then. Now, unfortunately, things have gotten much more difficult. So I have also heard when people purchase newer ripe Pu-erh, they will say things like, oh, you know, it has that wet pile-like aroma. And so I always say, what do you mean, wet pile-like aroma? What does that mean? And some people will say, oh, it has a little bit maybe of a fish-like aroma. Or some people make jokes about, oh, it smells like my grandma's attic, a little mildewy or things. To me, all of those things are extremely undesirable. I don't want my ripe Pu-erh to smell like fish, right? And so that kind of, and I do know many people online may disagree with me, that's fine, This is just my own personal experience and my approach to Pu-erh. But when I'm drinking right pour, I want it to be very natural, and I don't want it off-putting like aromas, because in my experience, if a quote-unquote right pour has a funky like aroma or a wet pile like aroma, and that'll just go away in a few years, in my experience, it never goes away. It stays with the tea for a very, very long period of time. And so it is best to find a tea that has a very good, clean, natural, pleasant-like aroma and taste profile. So any kind of funky-like aroma is really off-putting. And any kind of murkiness, cloudiness, not a good sign for me, personally. And you also have to think about, well, where is this aroma and taste profile coming from? Well, we have to think about how is ripe pour processed. A wet pile is often how it's produced. And if you think about that, you're going to need about 1,000 kilos of material. You're going to need a factory, a large factory floor. First question, is it a clean factory floor? Then once you put the raw material there, you're then going to need to add moisture. You're going to need to add water. Then you need to think in China, is there a readily access to clean quality water from the factory producing the right pour? Right? So these are things we need to start thinking about. Then they're going to cover that wet pile for sometimes 3 to 6 months. And then we also need to think about, well, there's also going to need to hire labor to rotate that pile and have even heat consistency. Maybe some factories don't want to pay for that labor to do so. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong or good in this fermentation. For such a long period of time, control of the temperature, access to clean water, clean factory, what are the practices, cleanliness factories of the factories and workers dealing with this large wet pile? And because we're dealing with some type of fermentation here, there's a lot of microbes. And I'm a professional or a scientist or a microbiologist, but I do know when there's a lot of microbes involved and things are alive, it's very easy for things to go wrong. And so if you have a right pour that has a lot of funky like aromas or taste profiles, maybe there's a particular makeup of that. Maybe there's good, maybe there's bad microbes. And so as the tea ages, it's only going to enhance what it already has. So if it's kind of bad and funky, it's probably going to continue on that trajectory. And if it's very pleasant and comfortable, it will continue on that trajectory. Sorry going on a little bit tangent there. I just wanted to get some frame of reference on how ripe tea is produced. And we need to really deeply think about, is it a clean, professional factory that is producing this ripe tea? So now that we kind of have that thought process going through our head, now we want to go back to pour. So now there's different types of pour tea. You may encounter some pour teas in recent years where they appear to be very, very clean and very translucent. Maybe it's an older right pour, but then you might notice you can only steep it 4 or 5 times. That's strange. We know right pour can be very durable and abundant. So why would it only be produced 3, 4, 5 times? Well, there's a new technique people are using now to make the right pour appear to be very clean. Maybe there's some additional washing techniques so it doesn't appear murky or cloudy or opaque, right? And so they're making it very clean, but then we're losing that abundance. We're losing that durability of the ripe tea. So we want to be on the lookout for that. And then when you get into ripe pour, I will say this from my own experience. I've been able to try some younger, some mid-range, and some very old ripe teas, and been lucky enough to try some very high-quality ripe pours. And I've been able to try some ripe pours that are maybe a year old or so. And I will say, even very good quality ripe pours that are very young have a very pungent like aroma and taste profile. So, but what is that? It could almost be too strong to drink too much of it when it's very, very young because it's so pungent. But I will say that aroma and taste profile is more towards the spectrum of a Chinese medicine-like aroma. It is not towards the spectrum of something more kind of fishy or kind of oceany-like aroma. it's more towards a Chinese medicine-like aroma. It's very clean, it's very strong and woodsy and Chinese medicine. And then what will happen is some of that pungency will kind of mellow out over time, and then it will start to develop. And that's what you really are looking for in a ripe pour. So all ripe pour across the board will be very strong and pungent the first year or so. And I've even learned from some tea masters that in an ideal scenario, maybe with a lot of resources, you would purchase some new ripe teas and let them sit in a more humid environment, maybe somewhere like Hong Kong or Taiwan for the first few years, and then pull them out into a more dry storage environment. Wouldn't we all be so lucky to be able to do that with all of our tea? Move them from different geographical positions. Not easy to do, but it's something to think about on how to approach ripe pour. So remember, with ripe pour, it is very, very, very important to make sure you are drinking clean, quality ripe pour. And just a quick reminder, when you're drinking the ripe pour, maybe don't try to use a strainer. Look at the color of the liquid. Even better, examine the wash, right? We usually discard the first wash in the ripe pour. Look at the liquid. Is it translucent? It can be dark. It's okay. It should not be a very quick ink-like separation, maybe like black on the bottom and then a lighter color on top. That would also be undesirable. You want translucent, light color. No strange oils or colors floating on top of the liquid. That would be undesirable. Opaqueness, murkiness, cloudiness would be undesirable. Just a really, really clarity, translucent, beautiful aroma and color. When you smell the leaves, they can be pungent, they can be woodsy, but they should be kind of more towards the Chinese medicine-like aroma, or maybe even towards the sweet-like aroma. They should not be too off-putting or too unpleasant. It should be somewhat natural. And then when you drink it, you're also looking for something that's very soothing, something that's very warming to the stomach. Me personally, any kind of harsh astringency, dryness would be undesirable. Maybe it's very flat, very, very one-dimensional. There's not a lot of body there. That would be undesirable. So you want something almost creamy. Some of the really good quality ripe pours will almost be creamy, a little bit sweet, have a little aftertaste, really warming and soothing in the body, almost a little thick. So those are the kind of things I think about when drinking ripe pour. Hopefully those will be helpful for you all as well. And just remember, there's a big difference between good quality and lower quality ripe pours, and we always want to make sure, are we drinking a good quality ripe pour? Is it clean and comfortable in the body? And lastly, I have noticed good quality ripe pours will make me feel very warm, maybe in the hands, maybe in the stomach, maybe in the lower back. So I often like to drink ripe pour in the evening or in colder weather or in the winter. So do hope that was helpful, and I hope you all have wonderful teas to drink at home. And as always, drink a good cup of tea, be happy, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.